The images which have been identified lead us to think that about 4 million years ago, in Africa, there existed living beings gifted with intelligence, not only using tools. Certain animals are capable of this, but even making tools to be used, a capacity of invention achieved by no animal. These first hominids were called Australopithecines. I think that this designation, which is beginning to date, is not correct, for it suggests a link with the apes from which they obviously differ. However that may be, they had a morphology similar to us in numerous respects. Biped posture, for example, although they were much smaller and had a skull capacity of only about 500 cubic centimeters. According to today's knowledge, they represent the most ancient generation, but it may not be excluded that future discoveries will push even further back the date of man's first appearance on Earth. We do not exactly know when this first wave died out. 1 million years from us, 600,000 years ago, we do not know. The second wave was that of the Pithecanthropes, or Homo erectus, identified in Africa, Asia, Indonesia, and Europe. Their size was closer to ours, with a larger brain, about 900 cubic centimeter in average. They discovered the use of fire. They will have existed during periods ranging from 5,000 to 150,000 years before our time. With the third wave, Neanderthal man, whose remains were found in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Java, the brain develops even to exceed the human brain of today in volume. This wave, it seems, was of a shorter duration, between 100,000 and 40,000 years. At around this latter age, the fourth and last wave appeared, bringing in today's Homo sapiens, who seems to have evolved very little to date. A negative fact is of the utmost importance. We have never found the link formally joining any one of these forms to any animal lineage, even an intermediate between primates and the lineages that I have just mentioned. At the International Congress of Paleontology, which took place in France in Nice in October 1982, this point was clearly emphasized. Starting with our common ancestor, modification must have taken place for us to end up with different types of the same species. Within the human species, I repeat, within the human species, an obvious evolution has occurred. An impartial observer is therefore obliged to recognize the happening of such events. Throughout the course of time, there have been modifications of the human form, but in no way does this signify that we descend from apes, as the adepts of Darwin's have claimed. From the Bible, I have retained as perfectly valid the idea of creation which is emphasized in its text. Nevertheless, as to the present value of the integrity of its narrative of the events, something entirely different is considered. The longest biblical narrative of the creation, in fact there are two of them in the Bible, describes, as I have shown in my book, the Bible, the Qur'an and Science, the creation by God of describe as the creation by God of the animals by presenting the various species are fixed through the ages. Moreover, the chronological data of the Bible lead to evaluate the age of creation of the world and the appearance of man on earth at about 57 to 58 centuries ago. In 1987, now, the Hebrew calendar places them at 5,747 years ago. None of these statements is scientifically acceptable. However, one readily conceived that for the Bible it could not have been otherwise. When dealing with such subject, the biblical authors of this narrative, the first one at the 9th or 10th century before Christ, are recognized by the Christian exegetes themselves as indeed inspired by God, as far as the truth of the faith are concerned, but having written following the ideas, tradition, superstition, or myth of their age about other subjects. How in this circumstance can they have not committed errors concerning facts on which no scientific light was shed prior to the modern era? It is not therefore astonishing that the Second Vatican Council, 1962-1965, declared that the book of the Old Testament might, I quote this declaration of the Second Vatican Council, might, I quote, contain material which is imperfect and obsolete, unquote. The concept of creation of man is often discussed by those who emphasize the resemblances between man and the apes or other supposed ancestors from the points of anatomy and various functions. By this way they suggest that we might be their descendants. They forget that these similarities were imposed on man, who of necessity was obliged to live in the same surroundings. We take the word in its broadest sense, which means our earthly environment with its geographical variations. Thus man needed a respiratory tract similar to what constitutes the latter in other animals which consume oxygen in the air, or a digestive tract to ensure its nutrition from the food provided by the ground or the flesh of other animals, on which man depends, just like animals are depending on others. These essentials of life lead to similarities in functions, physiology, biology, and a host of common characteristics. Without these morphological and functional resemblances, man could not have survived on Earth. Taking into consideration today's firmly established data of science, we cannot find a disagreement between them and the religious teachings about the creation of man, this concept being shared by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Islam has brought additional teachings concerning man in the Qur'an. In my last book, What is the Origin of Man, I have repeated that these statements on man were those which impressed me most from a scientific point of view. I even delivered a lecture on this subject in 1976 at the French Academy of Medicine. Now I have fully developed all these elements in 2 books. When dealing with the origin of man, I cannot fail to evoke how the Qur'an teaches us, in a more general sense, on the starting point of life. I will only quote the verse of the Surah Al-Anbiya. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together when we clothed them asunder, and we got every living thing out of the water? We do not believe. Who today does not know that the origin of life is